Hi, my name is Kevin Koska. I'm Commercial Division Manager with Allen Smith Pools. I wanted to walk you through our renovation of swimming pools and what we look at in order to make the pool area safe and beautiful for our communities. And so we're going to go and look at some of the issues and talk about what maybe the solutions might be as well. First area of concern at this pool would be the pool deck. There's a few things going on at the pool deck that I think could use some attention. The first thing is, as you can see a lot of cracking in the deck. Cracks are a problem because they allow water into the substrate as well as causing trip hazards. There's an area over here that is of concern also that shows deterioration of the deck. As the deck gets a lot of pool water and chemistry on it, it starts getting very rough and it'll start deteriorating. That can cause not only trip hazards, but it's also very rough on people's feet. Then you've got areas of trip hazards, like right here, where you have, this is the expansion joint that has mastic in it, and when water gets into that joint, it can cause areas where the concrete will lift. And when the concrete lifts, it'll cause a trip hazard. As you can see, this is about a ½ inch higher than over here. There is about a ¼ inch that's allowed by the health department, but if the health department sees something that large, they will usually cause you to either grind this or figure out a way to alleviate this issue. There is an issue, a situation over here where they've actually tried to fix the issue, and I'll show you where that is. As you can see right here, it looks like the deck has actually sunk a little bit, and that has caused this to be raised, and this is actually 3/4 of an inch at least. That's a bit of a problem, but as you can see, what they did here is they took the concrete out and they replaced it, so now it's a patch. They've also done the same thing over here, all along here, and what they're trying to do is bring this level up so that you don't have the trip hazard. The health department doesn't like that trip hazard for two reasons. One, obviously, because it's a hazard, but two, because it collects water, and they don't like any water collecting around the pool. Another area of concern as far as the deck goes would be this area. As you can see, you've got cracks that are a little bit different than the cracks that we looked at before. I like to call this a hopscotch pattern, and if you look, it's in squares. Now what those squares represent is the rebar. We call this shadow cracking. Shadow cracking is a problem because it's areas where the rebar might be too shallow and causes it to crack in a pattern like this. Water gets in there and it can rust. And the problem with that is if you're looking at something like a deck coating, you can't really coat over this type of cracking. This concrete would have to be replaced if you were looking at a coating. As long as we're talking about the deck, there's also another very crucial contact point between the deck and the pool. And let's look at that right now. This here, between the pool coping and the deck, is an expansion joint. There is supposed to be a complete separation between the pool and the deck. And what's in here is mastic. And the only reason why that mastic is here is to keep water out of this expansion joint. If water enters the expansion joint, then it can cause the concrete or the soil under the concrete to expand and raise the deck. When that happens, then you've got more of that trip hazard that we're talking about. And right here, it shows that it can also do something else. It can take soil away and cause the deck to actually sink, which is the area that we had over there where they had to replace the concrete. So you either have the concrete raise or sink, and that's a problem. Well, the reason why that happens is when your mastic, this rubbery substance that fills in over the expansion joint, when it fails and you get a crack in there, now that mastic is not doing its job and it's allowing water in there. So this is a case where that mastic definitely needs to be kept up. The next area of concern is the skimmer at this pool. And I want to show you, the skimmer is where the water comes in to get to the plumbing. And if you take this skimmer lid off, you can see where there's been a lot of repair done in here. Well, the reason for the repair is because the skimmer's cracked. Skimmers are only made out of plastic. As water and pool chemistry in the water hits that plastic and just age, it makes it brittle and it'll crack. When you have a cracked skimmer, now you've got another area where water can get into the soil behind it, and it can also start deteriorating the pool shell. The next area of concern on this pool has to do with coping. As you can see right down here by the skimmer, there's a problem with the bond beam being cracked. And when the deck pushes on either the pool shell or onto the coping, it can cause it to crack, which now again adds another area where water can penetrate, get back to the soil under the deck or the bond beam. One of the ways that we can tell when coping is loose or cracked is you just knock on it. If you can hear that, that's a nice solid sound. Now as you move over here to where the coping is cracked, it's a very hollow sound. That's because of this little crack right between the tile and the coping. It causes it to sound hollow. The reason why it's hollow is because the deck expands and contracts and moves. When it bumps into the coping, it causes it to be loose. Something that the health department is very concerned with has to do with safety and depth markers. And there are depth markers both in the waterline tile and also in the deck. And I noticed at this deck there are some issues, and here's a good example. This depth marker, it's not only cracked and causes some sharp edges, but it's also not a non-slip tile. The non-slip means that it's got to have sand in the actual finish, and that came about maybe 15, 20 years ago, which tells me these are probably a little bit older than that. But these not only have to have the number clear so that you can read it, but the new code says that it has to have an FT, meaning feet. And then also now you need to have a no diving marker tile right next to all of them under 6 feet. Another thing that the health department is concerned about is these rails. The first code violation that I see here is that this is what's called a 2-bend rail. You've got a bend here and you've got a bend down here in the water. What is code now is what's called a 3-bend rail. The reason why a 3-bend rail is important is because you need to, these rails need to maintain a height above each step as you walk into the pool. Well, right now you've got your descent starting over here over the deck where you have a flat surface. So now this is taller than it is at the edge of this step, and then it just gets worse as you go lower. The 3-bend handrail is important because it starts here and it goes straight over the deck, and then it starts its descent. That's why the new code says that it needs to be a 3-bend rail, like we have over here in the wader. However, there is an issue with this one. Remember we talked about the 3-bend rail? Well, the good news is this is a 3-bend rail. The bad news is it's set way too far back in the deck. This one starts its descent still over the deck. It's supposed to start its descent once you get to the lip, the end of the deck there. So this one might be able to stay, but technically it does not meet code. Another area of concern is the fill lines. The fill lines in this pool and in the wader come out of the deck and come across the deck. That can be an issue because obviously this is a trip hazard. Fortunately, it's underneath this rail, so it's put out of the way a little bit. But a nice thing that can happen is when the pool gets renovated, this can be placed underneath the coping and come out through the tile line. That way you don't have any structure that can cause injury. So now let's move into the plaster. This pool here can actually be closed down by the health department due to a couple of reasons. One would be the staining, which keeps it from being a white, smooth finish, which is what code is. And then the other thing is because there is some rough areas, some of it's spalling, some of it's calcium nodules, but there's some rough areas that could be dangerous to bathers. So that's something that we look at, is how long does it look like the plaster can last, and does it need to be refinished. The other issue here has to do with the trim tile and the breakline tile. Trim tile shows where these steps are, so that when you're in the pool, a trim tile is a dark tile that has to be non-slip now, so that you don't slip on the steps, obviously, and that just denotes where the steps are. The other tile inside the pool, besides the waterline tile, would be what's called the breakline tile at the 4.5 foot mark. It needs to be there, and it's there in this one, but it's not a non-slip tile, and that as well needs to be a non-slip tile. Maybe one of the most important health concerns that we have, and definitely it's a concern of the health department, has to do with drain covers. As you're probably familiar, VGB, or Virginia Graham-Baker Act, was around 2008. It was enacted, and it has to do with the suction lines in the pool. And as you can see down here, in the bottom of the pool, what is here is what's called an unblockable drain. One of the first things we do when we come out to a pool is make sure that the suction system is going to be safe and VGB compliant. So another safety concern here, and it's definitely looked at by the health department, has to do with the gates, the enclosures. Something that this pool does have is that the gate swings out. That's very important. If it swings in, it needs to be replaced during a renovation. Another issue, and this one is an issue at this pool, is that the gate is a key in, key out gate. That means you have to have a key, whether you're on the outside or on the inside, in order to get in or out. What needs to be there is some other means. It can be a thumb turn or a panic bar or something like that. Now, if you do have more than one gate and you have some key in, key outs, that's fine. You just have to have one that has a panic bar or some other means of getting out, but it has to be clearly marked emergency exit. So we were talking about waterline tile before, and there is an issue here with waterline tile. Typically, if the tile is not broken, it can be replaced. Down here in the pool, we have an area where it is broken, which can cause sharp edges. But there's always a reason why tile comes off or breaks, and it's usually not because the tile is a problem. It's usually because of what the tile is stuck to. And that's the issue here. The deck has pushed on the shell of the pool, caused a crack below the waterline tile, and that's why the tile is breaking off. That needs to either be repaired or the waterline tile needs to be replaced. So while we're looking at a renovation, we want to see everything, and even if it's not something that needs to be done right at the time, it's something we can at least talk to the association and say this might be a concern. One of those concerns would be about plumbing, and there are some telltale signs that there are some plumbing issues, one of them being right here in the return line. And what happens here is I'm seeing bubbles coming out of the return line. When I see bubbles out of the return line, that means that the closed system that's supposed to be only water has a breach in it somewhere. That means water is getting into the system and it's being shot out. Where that is, we have no idea. There are leak companies that can actually test and find out where those leaks are so that repairs can be done. So what we've done today is we've looked at some issues that are at this particular commercial pool. There seems to be issues at every single commercial pool, but what we would like to offer is that if you are wondering if you have issues at your pool, we'd love to come out and do an audit, and we can point out anything that there might be at your specific pool, and then even offer a proposal if it's within our scope of work. The main thing is that we're here to help you, and we want all your pools to be both beautiful and safe for your association.